Shepherding Chaos, the Retail 247 podcast. Embracing change in the world of retail tech.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Shepherding Chaos. I'm Martin Schofield, CEO of Retail 247, and today I'm joined by Heather Wood, who's the Chief Financial Officer of iconic British fashion brand LK Bennett. Hello.
Hello. So,
how is LK Bennett doing in a post-pandemic world?
We're actually having quite a good time at the moment. We obviously came out of administration, or the company was created out of administration of the brand 4 years ago. Obviously, immediately or within a year, rolled into COVID, which was a fun time for all, of course, in retail. We managed to come through that through the process of being really supported by our investors, our suppliers, our landlords. We did have to go through a CVA process, which was a shame. But since then, we've had 3 years of both sales and profit growth.
Excellent.
We're about to publish our previous year's accounts, which we're really, really happy with. This year, the beginning of this year, the weather has not helped, which I know we're not supposed to say as retailers.
It's a fairly traditional thing. Yeah.
But it is, sadly, as we all know. Thankfully now, we have seen the tides turn. And now we're just looking forward to the future. We've been spending the last few years pulling the brand into the 21st century, I would say, both in terms of product, systems, websites, and now we're really looking forward to the future.
Great. And you mentioned websites. So obviously as part of your remit there, you've now picked up the magnificent area of information technology. How was that for you? Was it thrust upon you?
No, it was a moment where post administration, obviously there was some new people involved. A lot of our directors came up through the brand. I myself worked there previously as financial controller, came back to help as the old company went to administration, was asked to stay, which I was really happy about. Our global merchant wholesale director was previously our head of merchandising. Same for our product director, was our head of ready to wear. She's now global product director. So while we've been there, people have taken on more and more of different roles. And from my perspective, I started off as finance director and within 6 months was doing IT, stock control and logistics. Very different, but really fun.
Excellent. What have been your IT priorities over the last 12 months? What's LK Bennett been up to?
Well, when I first took on IT, one of the major issues that we had was the main stock management system that we have, Island Pacific, hadn't been updated in any way for about 11 years. And if you can imagine, if you had the same original iPhone and never pressed yes to an update or improved your hardware and then go, it doesn't work very well. No, well, it won't, will it? Well, it won't. So our main priority was to decide whether or not upgrading Island Pacific was the right way to go or to change our system. We decided that actually there's nothing wrong with the system, but as I said, it hadn't been updated. So we decided that was the way to go. Unfortunately, COVID and the couple of years that followed that did put paid to any improvement plans. But in January this year, we did finish the huge upgrade. Took about a year to upgrade the system.
It's really a re-implementation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's really it is quite a brand new system. You know, there's nothing about it really that looks particularly similar to before. But it's cheaper than buying a new system. So, and now that's in now. We've migrated the back of the website as well to read from the same area. So from a stock perspective, obviously that's a lot easier to manage because everything's looking at the same place.
Yeah, cool. So technology can be a big spend, as you've already alluded to. How do you justify an IT project? I think was a conversation piece we're going to talk about.
I think, there's the obvious, as a terrible finance person who everybody loves. There is the obvious, what's the ROI of doing this? But the ROI, I think people can get a very narrow view of, which, does it improve sales or conversion?
I've justified many projects by it improves sales, and that's too much of a measure.
It will fix margin by 1%, will it though? But I think the reality of IT is often that, you don't necessarily see that increase in sales, and it's more about saving people time and energy and the manual work that you do versus actually this should be run by a system. A really basic piece would be the fact that we put in last year in finance, not particularly exciting, but an automated invoice system. Okay. So people email in their invoices, it scans it all, it does all of that. You just go in, double check the coding and send it, saves paperwork, saves time and energy, and people can do all of that online. That doesn't actually add anything to sales, but it saves a world of errors that people go from manually typing things in. The sheer boredom, as you can imagine, of typing in hundreds of invoices a week. So we kept better staff because they're not bored out of their mind. They've got time to spend on more interesting things, which again reduces other people's workload to then give benefit on other areas.
Yeah, and as you say, there are those sort of projects that are obvious to do. But as the finance person, I'm sure you're sort of constantly thinking, how do I justify? How do I get the return investment on this one? I've always found that a problem. In retail, there's always that gut feel component of any project.
I think that's definitely the case. I think sometimes, in my opinion, being a finance person, there's a little bit too much relied on gut feel, and maybe sometimes we should have a bit more structure behind those things. But then that's what I'm supposed to do, isn't it? That's my job. But I definitely think that some people in the world of finance can specifically say, if it doesn't make money, we're not going to do it. And I think that is an error, because then you end up with systems that haven't been updated for 11 years.
Yeah.
Or, for example, our e-commerce payment platform. A couple of years ago, we switched from a very old one to Adyen, and conversion on checkout doubled overnight.
Cool.
That's a 50% increase, but we didn't know it was going to be that good. To be honest with you, we assumed it would be better.
Yeah,
we knew it would be better,
yeah.
but that was impressive. Literally overnight, it went up by 50%. And those aren't exciting projects. That's not a gut feel. That's just a simple fact that people are too lazy to type in their numbers now, and everyone wants to do Apple Pay or Google Pay or some other version.
You've finished the IP upgrade.
Yep.
Successful. What have been the major benefits of that one?
The major benefits, so that we split it into two halves. The first was just basically upgrading what we have. So basically taking the old, turning it into the new. The main thing from what I have experienced is the analytics piece. So the old system was very much, it was, if you can imagine, looked like an Excel spreadsheet. The formulas, you had to write specific formulas to be able to get any information out, and then to be able to get information, say you wanting looking at net sales, but you want it by store by day, you have to drill, if you can imagine, all the way down. And then if you want to go to look at another store, you'd have to come all the way back out and go all the way down again. Yeah. So the time and energy just to pull information out of a system was quite frankly ridiculous. The analytics tool we have now is more pivot table based, so you can set it up and then it'll just refresh on a daily basis. It's a lot quicker and it's a lot slicker. Definitely easier for the finance team to use. I think one of the things that we have not yet achieved on it, being completely upfront, is, as I said, we've upgraded the what was to now. So everyone knows what they could do then and how they do it now. What we haven't got round to doing yet is utilising the wealth of the system. So learning what we don't know. That's next on the list.
And the problem I've always found is expectation changes. As you meet expectation increases.
That is very much
so you sort of set yourself up for failure at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
And equally additional spend and more spend. And that's the end of this cycle of IT costing you a fortune.
That is very much the case.
And I suppose the other thing, I guess IT is expensive or can be expensive, but that now has to sit, particularly in your world, alongside opening a new store or some sort of other investment. How do you go about thinking about that process? For
me, it's not difficult. I think it's more convincing others that's the reality. You know, we go and we look every year at our CapEx budget. We're very tight on what we spend. We want to make sure that we're making cash positive through the year. So CapEx has got to be below profit, below EBITDA, every year. So we want to make sure that that's what's happening, and we will always have a discussion. It's never an argument. Everyone's pretty realistic about what we need to do, but you've got the amount that econ want to spend on fun projects that look lovely, and of course retail want to spend on new stores that also look lovely, and then there's me in the corner going, we need to upgrade the system, that's more important, and everyone's going, oh no, it doesn't look fun and shiny, and I'm like, no it doesn't, but if you don't do it, we're going to end up in a problem again.
You're going to get back where you started in the next year's time.
Exactly that. And also these conversations around, oh well, actually we're not using the system enough and we should be doing more on that system. Yes, but that will also cost money. So, is there an extra functionality? Yes, there is, but we haven't bought that functionality because we just upgraded what we had, because that was the burning platform, So yeah, there's endless amounts of money you can spend, and it is tricky, and it's trying to find the balance between, we've just opened a new store in Cheltenham, which is absolutely beautiful and doing really, really well. That's so vital for us. We don't open stores. We don't throw them up on every high street. That's not who we are as a brand. It takes a long time and a lot of discussion and a few ROI projects to make sure that we're opening in the right place and doing the right thing. And then we go for it, and we're really happy about it. So everything is very, very considered. But it is sometimes a bit tricky to convince people that actually maybe this lovely piece of e-commerce work isn't as vital as this piece of system work. That can be,
contentious.
As I'm sure every IT person in the world watching this will go, that sometimes it's about doing the less sexy stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole layer of less sexy stuff in IT, and it's things like security, which are really come to the fore when there's a headline in the Daily Mail and you've released customer details, that sort of thing. So it's about
that no one thinks about until that moment.
Until that point, and the risk for the directors themselves being held responsible. It's those sort of projects that unfortunately or fortunately need doing, and that can absorb vast amounts of your budget overall.
Yes, absolutely. But it's so vital. At the moment, security is so vital on what we do, whether it's, we all worry about making sure we've got our cash in a safe in the store, but actually there's never that much cash in a safe. But
your customer data,
customer data or bank accounts and all the rest of it is vital. But we're very aware of that as a brand, and we do make sure that all of that is covered. But yeah, I mean, the acres of things that you could spend money on in IT is endless.
It is, and I think we're a software vendor now as well, and software pricing. Careful what you say now. Software pricing is kind of made up. So you can spend £1,000 or £10,000 or £10 million or £100 million, and more or less you're often buying pretty much the same thing. So I guess as a mid-sized retailer, that makes it very hard.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a tipping point, isn't there, before you spend not enough, and therefore what you've bought is sort of rubbish and they're not usable. And then you spent too much, and actually what you're getting is no amount of benefit. And, it's a very thin line, and I can't honestly say that we always get it right, but we don't always get it wrong. And I think that's probably the case for everybody. Yeah. You've seen retailers big retailers, and you hear all the big stories. They spent tens of millions of pounds on a system that just doesn't work.
More often than not wasted, yeah, absolutely.
And well, we don't spend that money, obviously, but we're also very careful about what we are spending. I think sometimes we're a bit too cautious. Sometimes maybe we are, but that's also on me, because I'm that person saying I am the voice.
Cool. So IT, part of your remit forever, or is it just a fleeting exercise?
Well, it's been there for the last 3.5 years, so probably not that fleeting. It's quite fun. I do quite like it. I mean, I'm not a techie by any stretch of the imagination, but actually the more I do it and the more CIOs and that I meet, not all of them are necessarily techie. It's more about the strategy of where you need to roadmap the IT function. So
yeah, as you said, I think I've said before, there are those IT functions and IT people that are very much about the security and making sure that the infrastructure works, and that's vital. But equally, the modern IT CIO is about understanding how a business functions and adding value across the piece.
Yeah.
So I guess I think I've definitely quoted before, but IT and finance are probably the only two functions that sit across the piece, understand the business workings end to end.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, actually. I mean, other areas sort of you are not in any bad way, but you do end up being a little bit like, I look at this piece and then that's where it stops. Whereas you can't do that. It's not possible to do that when you do sort of the back office operations, because it's the back office for everybody.
Yeah, we do some implementation work. I mean, you're the user of one of our solutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. But when we implement it, we spend more and more time doing the upfront analysis piece, and it's about plotting how things work, so process analysis, but primarily the exercise is about getting people together and breaking down some of those barriers you just talked about. So the biggest exercise of sort of self-realization in a function is when you get them in a room and say, this is what you do. And then there's a sort of, why do we do that? But you do that as well. There's a self-realization of some of the issues with general process.
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at some data warehousing work at the moment, and we did this piece of work with a company who came in, and we've got everybody from the different areas, so all the directors and then their key people who actually do the do, and everybody came in and we mapped out all the things that everyone's doing and the volume of Excel work and the amount of work that the information that you're pulling out and then putting into Excel to turn into something else that you put back. And it was just...
We could have a whole chapter on Excel usage.
Let's not. It'll go on forever. But it was really interesting, actually, and the reliance that people have, and also, quite simply, the resistance to change that people have as well.
Yep.
So people go, I want something better. I want it to be different. You go, okay, well, here's a piece you can do. Oh, that's not the way we've always done it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd say that people at LK Bennett are actually much more open to change. I think given the last few years and the fact that the people who are here in this company a lot of them are still the people that were there in the old company. Yeah. So, and you can imagine in the last 4.5 years, the sheer amount of change from everything. So they're a lot more open to change than people at other companies I've seen. But even then, trying to convince people to let go of their Excel spreadsheets, because that's where they feel safe and they know it works, and move to a different system where they can't see the back end of it. Because in Excel, you can see what you're picking up and you can see the calculations and you can find where the number is and make sure that number is correct and check it 50 times. Whereas often if you're doing it through a system and you've got a flash on your phone.
Yeah, blind trust has to occur. Yeah.
You've got to trust it. And I think people do worry because they can't check it all to the back end.
Yeah, no, we do some change management too, and you need to bring people along the journey. You can't force change upon people, because you say that they will fear it naturally. But equally, there are characters that embrace that change, and there are those that will be reticent for the whole process. Back in the Debenhams days, many years ago, we did an exercise with kind of putting the first user-facing kiosks into a store. And you would have thought the youth would be embracing and the old people would be very wary. But I remember using the store CCTV cameras to watch people using it, and it wasn't the case. It was just some little lady would come and do no problem at all, and some youth would stand back. And so you have to judge people as individuals and sort of bring them on the journey, I guess, is my message there.
Yeah, which is what we've been doing. So today we're having a playback from that first sort of meeting, and I'm making sure everyone that's going to be doing it is come from the beginning, so that when we do, if and when we decide that that's something we want to do, they'll have known it from the beginning and been involved. And I completely agree with you, because if you just suddenly turn around and go, we're doing this, everyone goes, no, don't want to do that.
It's I think we quote education rather than training. It's about the why as much as the how. And same for stock accuracy. We do some work with some retailers around stock accuracy in stores, and you can tell them and name and shame them, but actually if they understand why it needs to be accurate and the fact they'll sell more,
you'll sell more and get more commission.
Yeah, basically.
Absolutely. We do something similar. We've got around stock accuracy, and we've linked systems that, part of the project that we did last year is linking the systems and making sure everything's reading from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, and that's been really important. And it's a work in progress, because as soon as you've done one thing, like you said, there's something else will go wrong. And one of the wonderful things about IT is you go, oh, this bit's broken. Oh, now I see that this bit's also broken. And then actually this bit doesn't work that well, and on it goes.
So you're relatively new to IT in retail, and obviously I've been doing it for a number of years. Is it all the same thing over and over again? Why are we still talking about we need to have a view of our stock, and we need to have a view of our sales, and we need to have a view of our product and customers? The very basics of what retail should be.
But I don't think it is. Well, it's the same thing, but in a different format, if that makes sense. So what you said before, as soon as you hit here, you want
expectation.
So, previously it might have been we need to get stock accuracy within, 95%. Well, you hit that. Right, well, that's not good enough. Now we want 97%. Now we want 98%. Now we want 99%. Now we want to make sure that there's only ever 3 units out. And I think that constant want to do better is no bad thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's in one way it is the same thing, but in another way it's because you did that really well. So now we need to do better.
Maybe I'm just a jaded old IT director. It just does,
ask me again in 10 years. We'll see what it says.
It just does feel like it's good in a way, but the sales pitch we make often is about you need a single view of your stock. Well, of course you do. You're trying to sell the stuff. It's not rocket science at the end of the day. It really should be some of the basics we have in place.
Well, but the other thing as well is that this system that I'm just complaining about that we've upgraded. When they put it in, when the system was originally put in 13 years ago, it was top notch. Mm-hmm. But people don't keep on top, as we just discussed. People don't keep the spend on IT. They go, we need to do a big project. The project works. Okay, we'll leave it now. So another thing you might do is you might go, right, we're going to replace the company's entire swathe of laptops, and everyone goes, wow, shiny new laptops. 3 years later, somebody will go, these laptops aren't really working, we need new laptops. Someone goes, no, we've only just spent this
someone
money.
is generally the finance person, isn't it?
Yep, it's me, 100%. But it is one of those moments where people go, because we've had them for 3 years, they're not working very well, because you use them all day, every day, and you're sort of smashing them to pieces. And then there's people like me going, but we've just done this, and I haven't got in my budget another whatever it is, 100 grand, 200 grand to replace everyone's laptops.
You can absolutely see how you get that 13 years down the road and need that big spend again.
Absolutely.
And is there a way to avoid that, to fix that, apart from the obvious of putting something in the budget every year?
That is how you fix it.
But it's always overtaken by other priorities 9 times out of 10.
I think that's where you have to have both your IT director and your finance director in line to understand that. That you can't take that out of the budget. Being both of them is a lot easier because I'm in line with myself. Although I do have internal arguments, obviously. But when if we did go to the point where actually that bit is allocated for the fact that we do need to keep on top of the upgrades on various bits of system, and somebody will say, "But here's a shiny thing," and I go, "It's lovely. You can't have the shiny thing." Be the grumpy person in the corner, Martin. That's what you need to be.
Sorry, that's heckling from the sidelines. I'm not. Excuse me. What next? 12 months ahead. What next for IT and what next for LK Bennett?
Big question. For an LK Bennett perspective at the moment, we're looking to branch back out towards the US.
Okay.
In a dropship model. So that's what we're working on at the moment. Hopefully for autumn winter 23 this year that will start. That's really exciting for us. That's been a load of IT work that we've been doing, of course. Cool. So integrations, one view of stock, all the same thing again, just it's somewhere else. So that's a really big piece for us. And then the main thing from an IT perspective is, okay, we did the upgrade. Now what can we get out of the system? And that's the bit we need to do now. So there's little bits around the edges that we need to tidy up, make sure that we're fixing those pieces. And as we go through the, right, it's working now, we've noticed actually this bit needs to be linked in a better way, or that bit works, but does it work well enough? Or as I said, the analytics tool, it's there, but people know what to do for the things they already know how to do, but what more can we get from the system? So I think it's about a case of, I think when people go, we've done a big IT project, new system or whatever, they go, it's done, walk away. But actually, I'm really trying to make sure that's not the case.
Yeah.
So let's spend the money on improving that system. Let's spend the money on educating people on that system.
And truly get some ROI.
Get some ROI, because it is those little bits of extra spend that generate more in the end. Once you've done the big piece, if you do spend, I don't know, £20,000 making sure that this separate system absolutely matches this system, that will reap dividends in the future.
Cool. And then the logical progression of that is, what about the state of retail generally in 12 months? I mean, my observations, you've obviously seen that the larger organisations trying to be marketplaces, M&S doing their thing, Next doing their thing, buying brands up, etc., etc. Where does LK Bennett fit in that new world, or that potential new world?
Well, we're joining in those marketplaces. So we've just, we've got Next Platform Plus, which is exactly that, their dropship. We've just done John Lewis dropship. We'll have a look at what else is out there. Yeah. We're always open to new and exciting opportunities in those places. We're not going to become one of those people, obviously, in that we are a small independent brand. But we are, I think in 12 months, everyone will have calmed down a little bit. And the world will be hopefully a bit of a warmer, happier place.
Excellent. That's a good
me. But really, if you think about how the last 6 to 8 months have been, it's been very tricky for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Started obviously, as we know, back in September, October time, and then with interest rates and gas prices. But everything seems to be levelling out now, and it won't go back to where it was with 0% Bank of England rates, but it will calm down. And everything will level off, and people will find their new normal, as they do. Post-COVID, we all found a new normal. Everyone's like, oh, we'll never go back. Yeah. E-com's the only thing. No one will ever open stores again. And actually, we've sort of flipped back to being 50-50 again. And everybody, all these digital-only brands are really suffering now. Because people do want to go back to shops and they want to find life, but they don't want to go back in the same way they did. I don't know anybody who works full-time in London anymore.
Picking up on the COVID thing, what have you done as an organisation in terms of getting people back into the office? Because, if we don't mandate it for anybody to come back in, I know you work in a sort of fairly flexible way, but presumably that must reduce traffic in the stores in central locations. Have you seen no change in that? No.
Absolutely it does. The traffic's moved, is what I would say. Yeah. So sort of your more local high street areas, even in London, so like the Sloane Square area, people still obviously surge to Oxford Street, Regent Street. That's pretty standard. It's a bit more touristy anyway. Hampstead is a good place to be, or our Harrogate store. People are a lot more in their more local areas of London, and areas, like Canary Wharf and St Pancras have seen a big shift away, where there used to be hordes of people. But as I say, people are going to the office. I don't know anyone who works 5 days a week from home. No. They're just not going every day. We're not an everyday shopping brand. We're not a, H&M, go in and grab stuff because you're walking past it. People will go because they want to go to LK Bennett. So if they're in the office 2 days a week, they'll go, I need to go to LK Bennett on Thursday because I'm in the office on Thursday. So they're still going. The footfall probably has definitely dropped. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily transpire in the same way for us.
Has that affected the way or the decision-making process about where you would open new stores?
Absolutely.
So what's the target now?
So areas like Cheltenham, where it's a bit more of a sort of a local feel on the high street, but it's it's got to be a particularly relatively wealthier area, and we need to. And for us, it's also just about the placement. So even on the same street, you might go, well, I don't want to be placed there; it has to be over here. Our COO, Claudia, who does our retail, is very, very particular about where she opens stores, which is why that she opens so few but does them so well. Yeah,
excellent. And I think while we're on just general retail stuff, the only other question I've got springs to mind is about return rates.
Oh.
Yeah, because you see, obviously, brands starting to think about charging, high return rates for women's wear particularly, but, across the board. How is that a sustainable model?
Returns are really tricky. They are really tricky, and will
you end up charging for them?
We do charge for sale product returns.
Right. Okay.
So if you buy a sale product, then we do charge for returns.
Yeah.
We don't charge on full price. Well, we don't charge over a certain value on full price. Will we? I don't know. Is the honest answer to that? Because there's part of you that wants to go from an environmental perspective. People constantly buying and ship to and from is not good for your environment. We are working really hard on our sustainability. We've just got awarded the Butterfly Mark, which the teams have all worked really, really hard on gaining. No, it's absolutely fantastic. It really is. We work really hard on trying to be as eco. We're working on it. We're working on it as everybody is, but we're working hard on it. And it's expensive as well. You're sending these goods in and out, and they've got to be picked and packed and cleaned and put away in the warehouse.
Absolutely. The flip side of that is, again, the Harvard Nichols experience. The higher you get up the brand chain, the food chain, if you like, the value point, you've got fewer clothes, items that are out of circulation for potentially a long time with a high propensity to come back into the business. And you're going to hit a sale even sooner as retail continually shoots itself in the foot with sales starting earlier and earlier. And it becomes a disposal operation, and therefore loss making, and therefore a real challenge.
And I completely agree with you on that. But we do try and make it as easy for our customers; they can bring it back to store, or we try and make it as easy as possible for people to return. And also, if you bring it back to a store, we can put it back out again, can't we? But I think returns is one of those. It's a really tricky thing. It's also difficult from a customer perspective, because there is a simple fact, this Amazon idea of, if you look at something and it's £35 plus £5 postage, people go, I'm not buying that. But if it's £40 with free postage, everyone goes, oh, it's free postage, I'll buy it, lovely. Yeah. And the simple fact is it's cost you the same amount of money. It's just that people have included it in their price. But returns, you can't do that because you've already sold it.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out how to do that.
It's the precedents that Amazon have set, isn't it? We mentioned Amazon. It's the whole, the obsession with making returns easy, with dropping it off here, there, and everywhere, and it being instantly returned and credited to your account. That again, back to the change of expectation, and we've set that expectation with the consumer base that makes it hard. Yeah,
we do try and make it as easy as possible. We have a portal now; you can pick whichever carrier you want to send it back with, etc. But I think it's really difficult to charge for returns.
Absolutely.
I think you have to go about it a different way. So, you can do things like, can you monitor exactly, are the same 3 people returning hundreds of items in a year or something around that? You can look at it a different way, I think, than just flat charging for returns.
Any way, or any systems way, or any clever way of stopping people buying multiple things in the first place?
Well, get your sizing right in the first place. I think there's a really big thing around getting your sizing right, making sure that your sizing is consistent. So it's less about, I am definitely a size 10, but I'm always a size 10 at LK Bennett, if that makes sense. So it's making sure your sizing is consistent, and then people don't feel the need to buy 2 or 3, because if you've got customers who've bought from you before, they know their sizing. That's the theory.
I mean, sizing across brands is again, as a bloke, it always confuses me. It's like, why can't a size 10 be a size 10, or a size? It's a strange world.
I completely agree with you, and it's not just as a man. I completely agree with you. I can go into one store and be a size 10, and another store and be a size 16, or
I'm buying a slim fit because that's making me feel good. But really, it's difficult. Cool.
But you can't. I haven't changed size from walking from one store to another store, but it depends on the brand. But I think that's why women especially, they know the brands they like, they know the size they are at that brand, so you've got to keep that consistent. One of the problems with somewhere, like we just talked earlier about Next, buying all the different brands and selling it online, they must have a higher returns rate because those brands do not have consistent sizing. Next itself, and I've bought different items from Next, and I buy a size 10 or size 12, whatever, across the board, and half of them are too small or half of them are too big. And that's really frustrating as a consumer to have that. And especially when they're sending from different brands, you're definitely going to end up with that sort of varied.
Yeah, there's got to be a role for consistency somewhere. But if you set off with a blank sheet of paper, easy peasy, but bringing everybody together to agree on anything will be a nightmare. Cool. That's the end of my questions. Anything you want to add to the pod? Anything you want to ask about technology?
Oh, what do you think is the future for IT and retail in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I do think, and I do worry. And I think multiple points. Big ERP type spend, I think, is difficult for all the reasons we just talked about. The fact that retail is becoming more agile, and we have to be more flexible with the changing consumer expectation. And I've seen over the years so many failed projects of multiple millions of pounds. They're too big, too scary, take too long. So there has to be a different approach, which is what we do, adding modules that can be deployed quite quickly, but equally are guardians of the basic levels of data we just talked about, product, stocks, customer, and allowing or acknowledging the fact that chaos reigns outside of that. So the consumer will always dictate, what app is being used today versus what app is going to be used tomorrow, and retailers need to adapt and chase that next shiny thing just to keep existing. So that's one world on technology terms. I kind of worry about this as a provider of these services. I worry about this amalgamation of brands, Next, Marks and Spencer's, and the fact that there'll be a number of super brands potentially at one point, and what happens at that point. But yeah, it's always interesting equally to see successful brands like yourself thriving. And the only question I can't answer is what happens. What does the high street look like in 10 years' time? And that's a difficult one. I can't get my head around.
I don't think anybody has that answer. Else we'd be doing it now, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Really,
It's got to keep existing. And I know we've talked about it morphing into more of an experiential type thing, and there are more coffee shops and all the rest of it. But shops can't not exist. Therefore, we have to find a way of commercially allowing that to happen.
I agree. It's really the high street question, which people have been discussing for ever, is a really difficult one. I honestly couldn't tell you. I tell you, it is depressing when you go to your local town and everything's gone. That's really sad to see.
Yeah.
I think there is a real. This is not really about tech, but I think there's a real question around business rates. There has to be some serious movement on that, and around the
That's
way.
been said for a long time, though, and I agree with you. But it's not happening, is it?
No, well, it's how you tax sales is the conversation. We don't tax sales, we tax presence.
Yeah.
America did it a few years ago, switching from physical presence to economic presence. And if you sell over a certain amount, you've got to pay taxes. It caused a big furore, but actually, in my opinion, a much more sensible way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how do you, then you've got this whole people just disappear offshore. How do you actually manage that? And how do you get it to the right councils? Because one of the things about business rates is, an area council will collect those business rates for their local area. Well, if you've got an Amazon, let's just pick Amazon. It doesn't have a local area; it just exists in the abyss. And how do you therefore share that out equally and fairly across which is of course the never-ending question. But business rates eventually will
have to change.
It just has to change because the way that they are structured now makes no sense, which has nothing to do with tech, but it's definitely about the future of retail. Because
obviously the two are obviously linked. Yeah.
Until you can encourage people back onto the high street, then you can't change anything.
Perfect. That sounds like a reasonable note to end upon.
What a cheerful way to finish.
But I think what I took there is that the high street will continue and your brands will thrive, but there are some challenges ahead. So
there are some challenges that we need bigger pictures from bigger sources like the government to actually do something about. But
perfect.
We'll see if they do.
Heather, thanks very much. Much appreciated, and hope all goes well for the next 12 months.
Yes, very exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.